Ring dips. Ring dips are a great skill to work on, to master. It's a high skill gymnastics movement, but it's really useful for a lot of things we do in the gym. If getting a muscle up, getting a strict muscle up is something that's important to you, something that you want to accomplish, then you're going to need to be able to do a bunch of strict ring dips first so that you can dip out of the bottom of that muscle up. All right, so let's talk about ring dips. First of all, a couple of things. Ring dips, when I'm scaling ring dips, when I'm talking about trying to figure out where I need to start an athlete on working on their dips, a lot of the same principles apply that apply when I'm finding somewhere for somebody to start on a on a pull-up. So a few things. First of all, strict before kipping. We always want to be able to do strict pull-ups before we do kipping pull-ups. Take care of our shoulders. We always want to be able to do strict dips before we try to do kipping ring dips. Okay. Another thing that kind of holds true here at Twin Bridges, we don't use bands for much other than some warm-up stuff, some mobility stuff here at Twin Bridges. We do not do banded pull-ups. We certainly don't do banded kipping pull-ups. We don't do banded ring dips. I really feel like coaches that are giving people bands, giving athletes bands, you know, it's well-meaning, but a lot of times that band turns into a crutch, and before long you've got somebody who's been doing banded pull-ups for a year and hasn't made any progress. So we stay away from the bands. Do have some things you can do, though, as a way to find kind of an entering point to start training those dips. So first of all, one of the things that makes the ring dips difficult is we've got two different pieces of equipment I'm having to control. So it requires a lot of stability. So to take that element, that kind of challenging element out of it, what I can do is go to some static pieces of equipment and work on my dips. So first of all, we'll start off on the boxes. A lot of times we'll see people doing dips on a box or a bench, and they sit up like this. I don't like doing them that way to work on ring dips because it really takes you out of the position that you're going to be in on the rings, and you're not really strengthening the things you need to strengthen to ultimately progress to ring dips. So what I'll do instead is I'll set up a couple of boxes just outside, shoulder width apart, and I'll sit down in between them with my hands on the edge of the box, and from here now I'm a lot closer to replicating that dip movement that I'll be doing on the rings itself. Now, a couple things are true here. First of all, I want to bring for it to be a full rep, full range of motion on the dip, is I want to bring my armpits to my fists. Okay, so all the way down, press all the way back up. So I can do that on my box. I can also, if you have GHDs at your gym, we can come over here and use these handles on the GHD, set up a couple GHDs next to each other, and we can do the same thing, dips on the GHD. If you happen to have dip horns at your gym, a dip station, you can use the dip station. Now, when I'm doing these things here, a couple things. Well, first of all, the way I can scale from here is just like with a pull-up, with a ring pull-up, ring row, the closer my feet are to my body, the easier the movement's going to be. So this is a lot easier than this. I can even make this a lot more challenging by adding a box. Just like with a ring row, I can put my feet up on the end of a box, do my dips to a box. That's pretty challenging. All right. Over here, same thing. If you choose to use a dip station, same idea. You're not going to be, what I would do on the dip station to make it a little bit easier is lower the dip station to the ground so you can give yourself your toes, allow your toes to help you spot yourself a little bit. Next, we'll move over to the rings and talk about how to work our way up from these static pieces of equipment to those two rings where we're really bringing stability into the mix. Okay, so here we are at the rings. We've spent some time working on our dip progressions on those static pieces of equipment, the two boxes, the GHDs. Maybe you spent some time on the dip station and you feel like you're ready to try out coming over to the rings themselves. So before I jump up onto the rings, a couple of things I'm going to remind myself. So remember that gymnastics is shaped. So a lot of the things that we think about body position-wise when I'm up on the rig, when I'm doing my handstand push-ups, a lot of those same things hold true when I'm up doing my ring dips. So I'm really thinking about maintaining that hollow body position when I'm in the rings, my legs together, my toes pointed, really engaging my midline, squeezing that stomach, okay? What I'm going to add on to that when I'm using the rings is when I'm at the top, I want to keep my shoulders in a really healthy position. So there's three positions that we're going to see a lot of times with folks on their rings. So ideally, position I want to be in is what we call the mature ring dip position, ring hold position. So in the mature position, my hands are going to be kind of rotated out a little bit, which puts my shoulders in the position I want to be in, just like this, all right? Holding those rings close, tight to my body, okay? From there, My knuckles will be up against my hips. This is an okay position as well. What I don't want to get into is what we call the immature ring dip, ring hold position. So I don't want to turn my hands inward. In this position, you'll see people leaning forward. They're leaning into the straps because they're not quite strong enough, or they're tired. They're not quite strong enough to hold that neutral or mature position. So they move into that immature position and lean into these straps. We call it riding the straps. So they finish their workout for the day and they figure out that they have red marks all over their shoulders. It's because they were riding the straps. All right, so what I really want to think about is keeping those knuckles close tight to my hips, maybe even turning those hands out just a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do as far as my ring progressions are, I want to be sure that I can hold a support position. I want to be sure I'm stable at the top of a holding position, a support hold. So what I'm going to do is jump up nice and tall, jump up to the rings, top of the rings, and just hold myself for 25 to, I'd like to build up to 25 to 30 seconds before I move on to the next progression. So support hold, I'm just going to come up here, just hold this position. Okay? Once I'm pretty good at that, and I can do that reliably in sets, again, 25 to 30 seconds, I can do that a few times, then I can move on. And I'm going to show you in a second how to scale these things even further. But first things first, ring support. We want to show stability. I don't want those rings flying all the way out, flying out all over the place. I want to be able to keep them tight, close to my body. From there, what I can do is we can do negatives, just like with my pull-ups. So with my pull-ups, I would jump up to the rig, do a nice lowering portion of that movement. Same thing with my ring dip. So what I could do is jump up to the top of my ring support hold and then gradually lower myself down, 2 or 3 seconds, spend 2 or 3 seconds lowering myself down. I'll do that for a few reps. It's a great way to build strength. I can throw in some partial reps if I want to. So instead of coming to full range of motion, like we talked about, full range of motion on a dip is getting my fists all the way to my armpits. I can work on some partial range of motion dips. Okay, so we've got ring support holds, we've got negatives, we've got partial range of movement. Once I feel pretty comfortable doing that, I can go ahead and jump in and try to do a full range of motion dip. So first of all, I should have said this at the beginning, when I'm setting up my ring dips, my rings, I want them to be tall enough so that when I'm in the top of my support and when I'm at the bottom, I have room so I'm not whacking my feet on the ground. Now there's a fine line because I don't want to be so high up that if I get really tired and need to come down, I've got a long way to go. I don't want to hurt myself, but I also want to give myself plenty of clearance to be able to do the full range of motion of the movement. So we're going to jump up to the top, come all the way down, fists to my armpits, press out. Okay? Ring dip. So great movement. Now, how do we scale this? Again, a lot of the ways we'll scale these, same way we can scale our pull-ups. So a thing that I like to rely on, just like we do with our pull-ups, I can do toe-assisted ring dips. So what I might do is bring that box over behind me, put my toes up on the box, and I can scale the holds, the support holds, the negatives, and the full dips. I can scale them by adding the box. So what I'm going to do is just put my feet up on the box, and just like with a pull-up, I'll use my feet just as much as I need to. Okay? It's a great way to scale those movements. So in closing, a couple things to think about. First of all, chest position. So on the way down, I'm going to lead with my chest a little bit, but I don't want to come so far forward that I'm about to tip over. I also don't want to be super upright. I want to get my chest involved a little bit, so I'm going to come a little bit far forward. Again, I want to emphasize range of motion, fists all the way to my armpits, driving out of the bottom, keeping those arms neutral or mature, not going into that immature position. And just remember, this might be intimidating at the beginning, but just like any other movement, find something that you're good at today, find something that's a little bit challenging today, get really good at it, and then add a layer of difficulty. Get really good at that, build and build and build, and I promise you do it that way, you stay patient, you'll be doing ring dips in no time.